Hello, ladies. Welcome. Welcome back to the Heart of Strength. This is where we get together and really talk about our heart of strength that comes from God. It's where we talk about living a life that is shaped by God's truth, not just that noise that we hear of the world. I'm your host, Delina, and today's topic, it's one that's not always fun. It's not fun to hear this word, but I think that it can be a life-changing experience if we kind of lean into it and we learn from one another. We're talking about the word discipline. Now, before you roll your eyes and you hit that stop button, I want you to stay with me just for a few moments. I know the word discipline can feel heavy, maybe even a little negative, right? We tend to think of it as being a punishment because we think of discipline when we discipline our children, right? We're punishing them for something they did. We also think of it as if you've got discipline in your life, you're missing out on something. It's boring, right? Because you have to say no to things that you might think is fun, right? But here's the twist. In God's kingdom, discipline isn't talking about not having fun. It's not talking about taking that joy away from you. It's actually the road to peace and lasting freedom. At the end of this episode, I hope that you begin to think of the word discipline as a gift. Hopefully it will kind of change your mindset with that word. Now, I was reading a devotional a couple of weeks ago, and it was really about discipline, and this was the scripture that it was referencing, and I thought, wow, my friends at Heart of Strength, they really need to hear this. And so I'm going to read this scripture to you, and then we're going to take just a few minutes and talk about it. It says in Hebrews 12:11, it says, "No discipline seems pleasant at the time, but painful. Later on, however, it produces a harvest of righteousness and peace for those who have been trained by it." Wow. No discipline seems pleasant at the time, but painful. I love how the Bible, it doesn't sugarcoat things, does it? It's saying that it's not pleasant. It admits that discipline is painful. And honestly, I think that's why we avoid it a lot of times, don't we? But here's the thing. There's a promise in this scripture. If you read this again, it says, however, it produces a harvest of righteousness and peace. That harvest tells us something. It tells us that it's worth the wait. It's not instant, right? Nowadays we want so much that instant gratification, right? When we text someone and they don't respond immediately, we're constantly in a frustration of where are they? Why are they not responding? You know, it's an instant world that we're in. But this is saying it's worth the wait, that harvest. Now, discipline means to say no, right? I think that it doesn't always feel good to say no. Think about this at that moment anyway. Think about this. You're eating. You want that second helping, or you want that dessert, right? Your stomach is saying yes, and you're wanting to say no. It's a struggle. It doesn't feel good at that moment because you want to be able to eat what you're like that's on your plate, or that sweet dessert, right? No to a response that is being sarcastic Doesn't feel good when your pride is saying yes. When your pride is going, oh, it's okay, say it. Be sarcastic, right? No doesn't feel good at the moment when you've been asked to do something at work and you know you can do the shortcut way of doing it, right? But if you did that shortcut, it would compromise maybe your work ethic or your integrity. But at the moment, saying no doesn't feel good. In that moment, it feels like you're shutting yourself off of something fun or comforting, right? Or maybe no. Saying no would shut you off to something that is easy or easier, right? And that's why I titled this 1,000 No's, because I think so many times we have to say no so many times, and they don't feel good. But biblically, freedom isn't doing whatever you want whenever you want. Freedom is that peace that we're looking for, that peace that we get when we say those thousands of no's. That's the peace we're looking for. I want you to think right now about where God's been nudging you. Where has He been nudging you to say no? Maybe it's saying no to a habit. Maybe it's saying no to a relationship. Maybe it's a thought pattern that you continue to have. Or maybe it's the way you talk to yourself. These are all areas that God can nudge us to say no. Here's the thing though. In Hebrews, it talks about the harvest, right? And that's twofold. It says righteousness and peace. Now, righteousness isn't just about being good. It's about being aligned with God. I want you to think about that again. Listen to it one more time. Righteousness isn't about being good. Righteousness is about being aligned with God. Being aligned with God through your heart, through your soul, through your mind, and guess what? Your actions. That's what righteousness is about. The peace that it's talking about here isn't that shallow kind of peace that goes away when something's not going right. The peace that it's talking about here is that peace that holds steady. It holds steady when everything around you is shaking. Righteousness and peace. Now, I don't want you to miss this. It says that those things come to those people that have been trained. When I hear that, trained by discipline, I think about athletes, don't you? I think about training. I think about how it is an athlete has to practice. It's repetition, right? It's constantly being aware of what you're trying to accomplish. This is where you are letting God shape you over time. This is the repetition. This is the practice. This is what this scripture is talking about. Being trained, letting God shape you. I remember not too long ago, there was an individual that I kind of gravitated to at work. Started out was more of me wanting to step in and help, right? Be a mentor, encourage. And what I found was that it quickly changed to a time of complaining, a time of some being negative, right, about others. And what I found was that I began to enjoy those conversations. But God was nudging me to say no. And I kept thinking, it's not a big deal. This isn't a big deal. And I had to be honest with you, at first it was pretty hard when God kept saying, Delina, you need to stop this time that you're spending, right? And that was hard, feeling his nudge. But over time, I started to notice as I pulled back from those conversations and said no, my heart began to get lighter. I realize now that it gave me space. When I said no, it gave me space for that peace. It also gave me more time to do something good, because I wasn't spending those times in conversations that didn't mean anything. They weren't helpful. They weren't healthy for either one of us. It gave me that time that I could have that I didn't even imagine that I was losing. Here's what I want you to know. When you say no over and over, it gets easier. The first time I told this individual, you know what, I don't want to have these kind of conversations anymore. It's not healthy for us to be talking about other people and complaining all the time. And the negativism is really hindering our productivity, right? The first time I said that, it was hard. The second time, it got a little easier, still uneasy. By the third, fourth, fifth time, it was a part of my process. And after that, the person realized I wasn't the person that they needed to be talking to about these things. And so our time in talking shifted, and it became more productive in what we were needing to accomplish for work. The first time you hold back, I think about when someone hurts you. That first time you want to retaliate, right? The second time it still kind of stings if you say no. And then the third time it's like, oh, maybe that felt good that I didn't say and retaliate against that person. And eventually what happens is peace. Peace begins to win. That grace that you're now starting to show that person changes your instincts. It changes your behavior. And then that self-control just starts being that constant part of the way of your life, right? It becomes part of that flow. And then you're not retaliating against anyone again. To me, that is spiritual training in action. That's where it's talking about how people who are trained by discipline, that's what it's talking about. It's those no's. When we start asking ourselves, what will produce peace in me? Instead of saying, what can I get away from or get away with, right? Sometimes we're like, oh, I could get away with eating another piece of dessert, or I could get away with being sarcastic to someone. But if we instead start saying, what will produce peace in me? That second dessert's not going to produce peace, long-lasting peace. It may feel good initially, but later through the evening, you're full of regrets, right? Something starts to shift when you start trying to focus on what will produce the peace in you. I think a lot of times we find ourselves doing things because we want to be recognized. And I'm here to tell you that if you start making these small changes, initially there may not be any recognition. There may not be anything that people notice until over time that there's been a change. But what I want you to know is that God notices. And every unseen decision that you make is shaping the person you're becoming. You're not doing it to be seen. You're doing it to shape the person that God intends you to be. to be more Christ-like? Now, I want you to think for a second. What is one unseen choice that you've made recently? And you know that God's proud of that. I want you to kind of take a deep breath when you think about it and remember that moment. Remember how you felt. That's the kind of choice that grows that harvest. I was in a conversation last week with someone, again, at work, and I'll be transparent. I have a struggle with my tone, the way that I speak to people. And this person, I didn't appreciate the way they were coming across to me. And I wanted so bad to lash out, to say something. But I had to stop, and I kind of took a deep breath, and I had to think for a minute, how am I going to react to this? If I react the way I want to react, I'm going to feel good. But guess what? I'd only feel good for about 5 seconds. And then I would have regret, right? So instead, I stopped and listened, kind of took a deep breath. And then I realized that my breathing was a lot easier. Because guess what? I had peace. I had peace instead of regret. I didn't have anything to regret after that conversation. That's what it is about harvest. It's changing, small, gradual changes. What are you being trained for right now? Or maybe it is. Who is driving that training? Is it your inner self? Or are you listening and being trained by God? Are my choices that I'm making forming more of a Christ-like person? Or are they feeding that loud, sarcastic flesh where I want that quick fix, right? Now, I don't want you to get discouraged, because guess what? Today I could speak sharply to someone, right? The change is gradual. It's a process. But what I want you to think about is that farmer. Farmers don't plant one row and quit because nothing sprouted overnight, right? They trust the process. They plant, they feed, they take care of, right? That's what you need to be doing. Trust God. Trust the process. That's what God's intention is for us, ladies. He wants us to be more Christ-like, and it is a process. I want you to think about yourself and think, what do I want to be in 5 years? What do I want to be in, let's say, 2 years, right? What is it that you want to be, that person? And I want you to ask yourself, what no's do I need to say today so that I can see that version of myself that I want to be in 2 years? It starts today. It starts with those thousands of no's. So here's your challenge. I want you to pick one small, ordinary moment today. Don't wait till tomorrow. I want you to pick something today where you're tempted to say yes, because that's the easy way. That quick fix makes you feel good in the moment. And instead, I want you to say no. It might be what you're eating. It might be what you watch on TV or a movie that you go to. It could be how you speak to others, how you react. Then I want you to pay attention. Because what's going to happen is those no's are going to make space for something else. It may be making space to read a book instead of watching TV, right? There's so many different options when you say no to the things that need to be said no to. I want you to write that moment down because I want you to reflect on it. Because even if it felt really small that you said no about something, it's part of your training. It's part of what God's doing to shape you. And you need to be able to reflect on those small things, right? So let's embrace together 1,000 no's, knowing that each one will actually give us a yes to something even better. That's what we should be excited about. We should be trusting God. We should be trusting that training and believe that the harvest, that righteousness, that peace, that joy, it is so worth it. It is going to be so worth it when we start saying no to those things that we need to say no to. Thank you. Thank you for spending time with me today. I hope I just having a different outlook on the word discipline. I hope that it will resonate with you, and hopefully you will begin to see that discipline can actually be a gift. If you know someone that could really benefit from hearing this message about discipline, please share this podcast to them and let them learn a little bit more about the scripture and what God says about discipline. Until next time, I want you to keep saying no. I want you to say no to those things and yes to those things that are lasting. Because guess what? The harvest, it is so worth it. Thank you, ladies. See you next time.